Welcome to the Nourish Me podcast. I'm JoAnne Pavin, your host, and if you found yourself here, you're ready to take actionable steps to optimize your health and live a more balanced, productive, and creative life. In our tech-driven world, we need a reminder to slow down, stop the scroll, and take digital breaks. So let's get started. My first guest is none other than Rebecca Woolley. She's a lifelong friend and fellow integrated wellness advocate. She's also a nonprofit entrepreneur, master gardener, and unofficial co-founder of this podcast. What a better way to kick off our first episode than with Becky herself. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of planting seeds, both physical and mental. We'll delve into Becky's journey into gardening, her work with school and community gardens, and the spiritual connection between humans and nature. We'll also explore the patience and trust required in the planting process. You'll be motivated by the deeper symbolism of gardening and hopefully inspired to reflect on what it means in your life. Rebecca is a certified massage therapist and light worker with a bachelor's in psychology. She splits her time with homeschooling her son and daughter with her time in her garden. She recently started the nonprofit Redeeming Roots, which supports homeschooling families and school gardens in Southern California. So, without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Rebecca Woolley. And be sure to stay tuned till the end for a guided meditation on planting mental seeds. Let's get started. Welcome, Becky. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Good to see you. It's been so long in the making, right?
I know. It has been. I'm so excited.
I want to start today. I want to share a little bit of our story because it has deep roots. And since we're talking about planting seeds and we're in the planting season, our roots go back a long way, right? So I want to say probably
23 years now.
Yeah, or even longer. Oh yeah, don't age us.
I'm just thinking of when I moved. I'm just thinking, when we were on the flight to California, that was 23 years ago.
Yeah, but childhood. You're forgetting all the childhood,
right?
You don't.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Becky, I call her Becky, but she's Rebecca, and I'm always forever going to call you Becky. But today she's Rebecca Woolley. And I want to say that I've known her for a lifetime because we met when we were young. And so our roots are deep. So speaking of roots, we are well rooted in our friendship. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of things that have to do with cultivating soil, not only for planting physical seeds, but also for planting mental, emotional, and spiritual seeds, right? So, and there's no better person to do this than you because you are so cultivated in your faith, in your family, in your profession, in everything you do for the community. You are way overqualified for this discussion. So I want to enter into this with asking you just about an overview, because I know that you've been gardening for over a decade now. You can correct me, but it's been like way over a decade, right?
Yeah, pretty much. When Davini was in utero.
Yeah, right. And I love that story too. There's so many stories. So I want you to take us back to when you really got into physical planting, like the gardening that you do now, and how that came about, or the interest, or what led you to that, if it was rooted in childhood or if you just took it up as an expectant mother. So bring us back to that point and tell me how you were inspired to do that.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, in utero with when I was pregnant with Davini. So Ben was my first, and then and I was just tramping around the ocean with him. But then when we moved to the suburbs with Davini, I got pregnant and just really felt like we had our own piece of land, our own plot to kind of invest in and start digging in. And so when I got pregnant with her, I just felt really, really called to just be in the soil. Like I took a composting class. And so I started learning about just the elements of the soil and what that all, contains and how soil is made through composting. And so I just got really passionate about just getting my hands in the dirt. And consequently, I mean, she's such an earth baby. She loves being around the dirt and being with horses and whatnot. So I don't know how much of the thread goes through, but that's where it all started. And so she's 12 and a half now. So that's kind of where it all started.
And you started seeing the, and I know you started seeing the significance of it because you brought that craft to her school. You started the Paloma School Garden. That was something that you saw was dead, and you brought it back to life.
Yeah, and it essentially it was when the kids started in Montessori school. So Ben started as a kindergartner in a Montessori school, and it was like a grassroots school. We were going to start a garden on the side of the parking lot, and that was my way to be at the school and helping and being with the kids, but not too over invasive in the classroom, and just giving them their space to have a school experience, but being out there and providing that respite for the kids through the garden, and then also teaching them about where their food comes from. And all of it started to kind of like take root and shape being in the academic setting with them, and just also being able to provide this garden space for the whole school. So that's where that started at their school. And then when they went to the school down the street, Paloma, that you're talking about, they had a garden plot that was abandoned over the years, but they had a space that was set up for gardening, and we just kind of took that over, and it just flourished just from the kids wanting to be in there. And I can hear your kids.
Yeah.
So it was awesome. I've been in the garden with the kids, and now we're starting another one at the school that they're at now. It just seems like a natural thing. I've found that the kids just really enjoy it. The kids that really enjoy it actually are the kids, though. It's interesting. We have so much trauma in our society these days, and like a lot of kids that are on the spectrum or have different anxiety issues and stuff, those are actually the kids who enjoy it the most, which is interesting, I've found. So anyway, that's a side note.
Yeah, no, that's a good conversation to get into as well. But all right, so just tell me, because I'm so drawn to the artwork behind you. This is important. So you are sitting in front of a beautiful piece of artwork, and I just want you to touch on that because it integrates everything that is really about your gardening and the soil and the cycle of education. So can you share a little bit about that piece of art behind you?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but it's got like 4 different quadrants on it. And that if anyone wants to look at it, it's on our website, the Redeeming Roots website. It's redeeming-roots.com. And you can find it there just to get a closer look. But it's like it's called The Balance of Education. And it came alive from giving my friend Elizabeth, who's an artist, the vision of what I felt like I was trying to communicate to people constantly, what I felt like was the balance of education. And I felt like people didn't really get a grasp of it unless they could see it in, an art piece or something, visual in front of them. And so we worked together and collaborated on her creating it. And it just has 4 different quadrants, basically. And it's supposed to represent like a balanced school day for the kids. So, they're involved in one of the quadrants is there's academics. And so they're involved with their academics. They're studying, it's got all the books. The base of the books is the Bible, of course, just coming from just a firm foundation faith. And then outdoor time they have in the garden, also, and then there's music, art, and also sports. So just a full, for my, just thinking like the education system, the way that it's been going towards is it just keeps like losing different, it's all based, it's really heavy handed on the academic quadrant of their day. And so these kids are losing just this balanced sense of being a whole human, holistic person, of just, going out and kicking a ball around, or digging their hands in the soil, or playing with the bugs during a recess time, or, playing an instrument or doing art during their school day. All these things they're starting to just fade away. And so just reintroducing the fact that these are elemental and, needed during every single day. It's like, it's not like it just hit it once throughout, the week. It's like every day they should be going through this whole like balance of, just like we eat 3 meals a day, you should just, have the balance of their day to get a full experience and go to bed, dirty and tired and, tuckered out. So
full holistic experience. That's awesome, because this is a holistic podcast. So I love that. And I want to go back to just the 5 senses, because you're talking about, that the balance of education and engaging all of the senses. And when you're stuck in a classroom inside a building for 6 hours, that kind of restricts the ability for them to expand their senses. And so, all right, so let's go back to the garden, our favorite place. Yeah. I want you to get philosophical with us, because you can do that like no other. You are the queen of symbolism and relating all things spiritual to our physical world. And I think people really need that right now. So you have a gift of doing that. So can you give me you can go like free association here. It doesn't have to be an organized thought. I want it to be wherever you're inspired to go with the, bring it back to the garden. And I remember this so clearly. You said it started in the garden. We need to bring them back to the garden. And that that's not limited just to the children. It's, I think, to everyone here on earth. So can you expand a little bit on that? It rings in my head every day when I'm going out into nature, when I'm going into my garden, when I'm trying to teach my children about where food comes from, and trying to engage them in planting season and planting flowers and vegetables alike. I'm always telling them, this is where everything comes from. It starts here. So give me your 30,000 foot view of that one-liner, back to the garden.
Back to the garden. Yeah. Well, that's, essentially as trying to define and why it's so important. I feel like you can learn every single thing in the being in the garden. There's so much to learn. But essentially it's very simple that in the garden, we started out walking with the Lord and with God, and we left and we're, put out of the garden. So it's just going back to that place where we can hear, our Creator's voice again, and just in so many different ways. I just feel like, just in all ways, and just connecting with that. And I just feel like we've lost that connection. I want to share with you this poem that I read from this book. It's just one stanza from the dance book by Araya Mountain Dreamer. And there's a stanza in here, and it's just so beautiful, and it just kind of encapsulates what I'm trying to say. But it says, "Take me to the places on the earth that teach you how to dance, the places where you can risk letting the world break your heart. And I will take you to the places where the earth beneath my feet and the stars overhead make my heart whole again and again." And so I just love that. I feel like it speaks to the part of us that wants to connect so deeply, not only to the Creator, but to His creation. And until we can learn to listen to that, like a lot of people are very lost in so many ways, all the way down to now their identities. Like they have no idea their identity and who they are, who they're created to be. So I just for me, it's just important to have a deep connection to the creation. And in the garden, I feel like that's, especially with children, with everyone, but especially with children, it's like it changes the trajectory of their life, and in a good way. And so that's my passion. That's what I feel like I have to bring to the world, is connecting the children, not only to themselves, but to the creation, and then the creator. And that's it.
I love it. I do. It's an awesome message to spread. And I hope that the listeners today, if they hear this, that they can refer the podcast to those who have young children. It's so important. With that being said, let's go back to the seeds, because we have deep roots. Our seeds were planted by our parents because they were friends. And then we met because of our parents. And then we cultivated that through like a professional relationship when, we worked briefly together in the early 2000s, and we were such an integral part in each other's path because, you've been my biggest fan in all of my entrepreneurial endeavors. So let's go back to the seed. Okay. So we plant seeds. Okay. You have such a great analogy to seeds being planted, and then the patience that's required, right? So you spoke of just being patient and not trying to peak or to anticipate the growth. And can you expound on that? Because it's so important. Like sometimes we want that seed to grow and it's too early. So I love that. You had mentioned that it's just, we have to be patient. And you don't have to expound on it, but I thought maybe you could make it sound a little more metaphorical.
No, yeah. No, it's a good point.
We peak. I don't want to tell it all.
It's a really good point. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. We've talked about this a lot. I feel like, it's difficult. It's difficult to trust the process. I find this this is like hallmark of starting a new garden. You talk to a bunch of people, in the community, hey, let's start a garden. Oh, that sounds great. It's wonderful. We're going to get it going. And inevitably, like, people can't, trust the process of like, this is going to take shape in the way that it's meant to take shape for this space, this part of the land, the plot of land that we've been given to steward. And because it doesn't always look the way that you envision or think. Like, it usually doesn't have squared out lines. It's not, it's kind of like evolved. And so that's where I feel like there's so many different things in the garden when you start this process of making a garden or planting good seed, is that you have the best intentions of what's going to happen, but you don't necessarily know how long it's going to take or the process. And we can look to nature to know generally, like, you put a seed in the ground, you water it, it sprouts up, and then it goes through a cycle, and then it goes to its own seed, and then it dies off, and that whole process. And it's hard to go through that process. I feel like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it's very reflective of what happens in our physical, our being as humans. And so I'm always watching and just seeing how I've told you that story about my gorgeous poppies in my front yard. They are blooming, and they're just the glory of the neighborhood. You drive down and it's just like, every wow, that's amazing. And then, and then I turn around now and it's like they've gone to seed, and I'm waiting to pull them out, and it looks like a dead wasteland in my front yard, and what an embarrassment. But I know that it's like next season's growth is in that seed pod, of the wisdom. And that's kind of like the conversation that we're having right now. It's like the wisdom. So what are the seeds of truth that you and I both learned from this last season of life that we're bringing forth to then put out into the world? What seeds of truth do we have? And not many people, you know, they want to pull them out, or it doesn't look right, or it doesn't look, or they don't value the fact that there's so much seeds of truth in the life journey that, you know, I mean, they kind of want to, like, I don't know, curate them, or, you know, fix it, you know, to make it look a certain way. And so, I don't know.
And not all of the growth is going to be pretty either. Not all of the growth will look like we want it to look. And some of the seeds will thin out, and we'll have to, you know, either throw to the side, or they won't take again in their new spot in the soil. So there's all of that can be taken into account when we think about how they relate to our physical, or I should say to our mental and our emotional, so that we are continually having to clear our thoughts and prune our thoughts and thin our thoughts. And with that, you know, we get overgrowth in our minds and we have to breathe it out and, you know, let it go. Right. Yeah. And we know that because we Rebecca and I share a history in body work. So we know that too well, right? The breath is so powerful in relaxing the mind, but the muscles and the entire being. And if you don't use the breath, you're stagnant. And the breath is like the air for the seeds, right? We need air, water, nutrients, nourishment.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to like the whole theme of the nourish me nature. It's really, this is nourish me nature talk here. It's about that nourishment, and it's a full cycle of nourishment. And we can look at it from seed to plant to fruit, and then death again, that our ideas are the same way. And our ideas can come and flourish, or they, you know, can die in their tracks. So what do you want to add, if anything, to the concept of soil cultivation, seed growth, fruits, vines?
The only thing I would,
what do you want to add to that? Because there's so much that I'm sure we could add, but what would you want to add that would be good for the listeners to take away, like some mental seed that they can plant and take with them after listening?
Well, the biggest thing for just, you know, like we were talking about, going back to trusting the process, I feel like, and the mental seeds, like I tell this to the kids all the time in the garden, that, you know, you talk about having a green thumb in the garden. Everyone's really familiar with that phrase. But when I'm talking with the kids, I'll say, you know, we need to have a green tongue. And I explain to them what I mean by that is that the tongue is, you know, it can be the source. It says in Proverbs 18, death and life are in the power of the tongue. So those are you know, you have the power of life in your tongue, and it comes from thoughts, comes out, you know, we can put death or life on someone. And so it's like, we have to be very conscious, I feel like, in the mental seeds, what are we reproducing out in the world? Because you have the ability to speak death into someone and discourage them, and, you know, ultimately, you know, so it goes to destruction. Or you have the ability to,
it's like you have the power with it.
You have the power in the tongue to, you know, or to speak truth and encouragement and life to someone, then that reproduces. And the way that you can tell the difference is, you know, is just the feeling in your heart center when that's spoken over you. It's like, you know, does it feel like the fruit of this, like a spiritual fruit? Joy, peace, love, patience, kindness, goodness, you know, patience, self-control, you know, does that heart feel like that? And so you're going to then receive that. It's going to have a seed in you that's planted that ultimately has the ability to reproduce itself. That's life change. That's world changing. You know, when that lesson comes out in the garden with the kids, again, trajectory changing for the kids in the garden, because it's like, oh, I have the power now to, just like the seed, you know, in my tongue. And so I don't know, that's all I have to add to that as far as like when I'm in the garden with the kids. I really am it's teaching them lessons about not only the physicality of what's happening, but like, because we're humans and we have the ability to, process and think, that we have a greater responsibility on those next to us, other humans, that we have the ability to speak life over them and into them, which is a beautiful thing. It's a loving thing to do. So
it's
yeah,
nourished.
so that's what I have to say about mental seeds in the garden, which is a really awesome. I feel honored to be able to like talk about that with the kids when we're in the garden. I feel like that's kind of like the whole point of all of the other stuff, is like, how do we communicate and interact with each other as human beings? Because we're seeing how this all plays out, with the plants, but how does that translate human? And it's in how we treat each other, what we say to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be beautiful and produce beautiful plants and fruit, or it can be ugly. And that's where I think people need to just mentally think about that everything that comes out of our mouths is potentially a seed. And those seeds hold divine power. They really do. So this is something that I want I want to touch on, just because I think it's, typical of our society, where everything is perfect or picture perfect, or, everything is on the outside just looking hunky dory, right? But when you've had this experience with teaching people, adults, not children, but adults, about gardens, I want to ask you, what's the biggest challenge for adults when they think about just planting a garden? And that's a physical garden. Like, I know that you have experience with people. Maybe they have not one iota of experience with ever planting something before, but what's your first takeaway when you're trying to educate adults on the garden?
Like I said, the biggest thing, I want to be positive in encouraging people to start and undertake that, and to go out in their yards and do it. But, there's, like I said, there's a preconceived kind of like idea, how is this going to look, and I can just tell you that, my front yard, not many people do this, it's like cover their whole front yard with mulch and garden beds, and just because they're concerned about what the neighbors are going to think. But I can tell you that my front yard has become a source of community building. And that should be really at the heart of, if you're looking to enrich your whole life situation with your kids and with your spouse, and go plant a garden and not be concerned about how it's going to look, or if it's going to be people are going to drive by and
ornamental.
You have to kind of set it aside, because I mean, it's just like people get so hung up on that, and it's like I'm having a situation at with the garden that I'm starting right now, with the concern of how it's going to look to the community. And as a leader, I have to roll with that, and it's fine. It's because I trust the process, so it's like people might meet up with these walls within themselves of, and then we just have to, just like anything, see where the wall is, and just hold space for it, and for that person, I'm trying to answer your question.
No,
and
you
I know
did.
I'm going around
it. I think you absolutely did. It should be the growth in the process, and not for ornamental satisfaction, or for the ornamental reasons, for the outward appearance. Although people do want to see the beauty in a garden when it's, a center of a community. They do want to see that. But of course, if they trust, it always is, right? If they trust,
it always is.
Yeah, it always is. And it just, again, it's societal. It's breaking through all of the societal, the ingrained consciousness that we have about, perfection and beauty, really, people are so used to seeing.
Yeah. The other thing is I think that people, and this is something that I personally have had to break through my own healing process emotionally, is that I feel like people, like there's a certain subset of rules, like there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And so I just challenge people to bust that completely out of, their thinking. There's a million ways to do something, and it's your way that's going to be, if people could have the courage just to start and to do something, in starting a garden, planting a seed, and not knowing if, a lot of times I'll get this question all the time, is when's the right season to plant this? I live in Southern California, so I can say we can plant anything anytime. It doesn't matter. You can just throw a seed in and see if it works. Not so much by you guys, but that's the one question I get. Well, I don't know what to plant at this time, or this, gardening it's a 100-year process. You're always going to be learning about your space. And that's the other thing, is that your plot of land or your little balcony on your apartment with your little pot is going to be your land that you've been given steward over from the Creator. It's your responsibility to learn about it. No one's going to tell you, I can't give you, a recipe for success on your plot of land there in your backyard. You know it better than anyone, because you're stewarding that spot. You're listening, you're out there, you see the birds and the squirrels and everything, what's going on. And so I just feel like people need to, that's the beauty, that's the fun of it and the beauty of it, and just rips off all the rules, and I've had to learn this, and it's gotten me stuck in a lot of ways, there's a right and wrong way, but there's a lot more to be gained, which is going and oh, that didn't work. But then now look at my poppies that are growing, we're growing like crazy, and I didn't plan that, but I had a full front yard of poppies because I just let it go, and they spread, and that was beautiful for this last season. You just can't plan those things. People would ask me, Scott, how did you plan all these poppies? They're so amazing. And I didn't plan them. I just allowed nature to do its thing. And I wasn't too hung up on,
Right.
I just took out the weeds in between, and that's me and my gardener, he's really good. It's if I see a flower in my yard, or I see a tomato plant, he knows, we both know, don't pull that.
Yeah.
Pull the weeds, but don't pull the, if it's a flower, don't pull it, but a lot of times people, that's the other thing, just learning what has truth and what isn't. That's another life lesson. What's a weed? That's a big garden lesson we do with the kids.
Yeah. And that's
anything you don't want there, basically. Yeah. Anything you don't want there
is a weed.
So,
is that how you teach the kid? Yeah.
A rose could be a weed if you don't want it in your garden. It could be a weed. Whereas anyone else, it would be their treasure, so it depends on what you want. And that's what I love too, is your garden, your space, your land space is such a reflection of your heart space. When you drive up to my house, it's my house. I know you've never been to my house in California, but I know if you drove up the street and you didn't have my address, you'd know which house is mine.
Yeah, I know.
It's
emanating with white light.
Yeah.
And there's angels singing
all over it. I mean, it's just
you have divine. You do. You have the beauty of the divine, and there's that energy, the energy that is just emits from a pure heart, like you said. You have pure intention.
Everyone has, and everyone has their own imprint of you can tell. It just reflects, who you are. It's another expression of who you are, because you've interacted with the earth in that way. So, yeah.
I love it. And not to mention that as we wrap up, though, how relaxing it is to actually put your body in the earth, to walk with your bare feet in the soil. And you and I are big soil people. And that's a whole nother discussion, is, the quality of your soil, not only your physical garden soil, but the quality of your mental soil. Like really, how good is your soil, and that can be the soil of your heart, the soil of your mind, cultivating that. And there's a spillover in all areas. I mean, it's really, what's the quality of your friend field, your family field? How are you cultivating the field of your relationships? And it can go on. And it's all related back to those key points that you just brought up, which are beautiful because, it's so symbolic. Yeah. People forget, and so we're here to remind them, right? We're here to celebrate and reminding, people to come back to that and to start planning something. So what would you say, an actionable tip for someone listening? What would you say right now? What are they going to go out and do today? And this can be anything. I mean, it might not have to do with just like, go to, Home Depot and get your gardens. Like it can be mental, spiritual, physical. What do you want to say to them?
Okay. So I have two things. The two things that I noticed when I was thinking about our conversation was that I remember there was only one edible thing there was probably more edible things in the forest and whatever behind our house, but like one thing, because my mom didn't plant vegetable gardens. So right by the house, she had planted some mint. And I remember, I feel like that's where it all started, because I was able to, there was one thing I could eat in the yard, and it imparted wisdom to me, like, if I go outside, I can, like, that's the one plant I can eat. And I just think that's like, I don't know, for me, it was life-changing. I feel like when kids have that realization that they can eat something that's growing out of the ground, even if it's something very simple, like a mint leaf out in the yard, it changes them. And I just think now here I am, it's all I do is garden, and, I'm outside. So it's just, I think it again changes the trajectory of your life. So it's super important, no matter what you have, even if you're not planting a vegetable garden, to go out into nature and see things like, I don't know, a neighbor's garden, whatever you can eat, if it's an edible flower or a mint leaf or whatever, to teach your kids, like, that's, you can eat that. It just changes things. Kids are not used to like feeling like that's safe. They're like, oh no, I can't, it's dirty, I can't do that. But the more that we can empower them with like, no, that's actually food you're supposed to eat. So anyway, that was one thing that I thought was super important, awesome. When I was growing up, changed things, because my mom didn't have a vegetable garden, which I think is still super fascinating to me. Still doesn't have one, but anyway.
Well, maybe after she listens, she'll start one. She'll say, darn it, Becky, after all these years.
Well, the deer. She always says the deer eat it all.
That's okay. I can go over and build her a deer fence. I'll do that.
Yeah. I know. I love those gardens with the tall fences. They're so pretty. And then just a tangible takeaway, the one thing I was thinking, like, what would be the one thing that I would say? And it's kind of weird because it's off topic, but the one thing I would say that would change, that's going to change your family life, and it doesn't have anything to do really with the garden, but it's when you set your table at dinner time, set your table intentionally for each person. And that's like, I feel like that would change our whole society if it wasn't just the paper plates or the takeout food or whatever. I just feel like there's something, not only does it connect you to what you're eating and to the people that are there, but to have a sit down dinner and to set the table intentionally for each person that's going to be there, rather than just putting a stack of paper plates out. For me, for whatever reason, I don't know why that came through, but it's for somebody. And it's maybe for everyone, is that set that place, right? To set the place for the person, because I just know how that feels,
and wait,
I know how it feels when I'm doing it. Yeah.
And the candle. Yeah. And remember the candle in the center.
Yeah. I know. And setting the light. I know.
I'll just backtrack. I'll backtrack into that. Becky contributed a beautiful article, and part of that article for the meal was about putting a candle in the center of the table to illuminate the faces around the table. I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you even remember that you wrote that, but that was absolutely life-changing for me. Like, the light within us is reflected in our conversation around the table, but the light in the center of the table so that we can show each other who each other is. So I think I want to say that main tip that you just gave right there, that's a segue into a whole new conversation we can have about the meal.
It certainly is. I think that's a good way to end.
The meal.
I do. Right? I know it is. It's so important. I don't know why I felt the whole garden lesson, everything. People can plant a garden. I encourage people to plant a garden. Get out there. You can't make mistakes. That's not possible. But what it comes down to is a connection with other people, the people that you're in relationship with. And the very simplest thing you can do is to make a meal for someone and to set a place for them on the table. And it changes. It's going to change.
And serve them the food from your garden.
Yeah, I know.
Amen.
It's a beautiful, simple life. Simple lesson.
It is. It's simple, right? But we've kind of mucked it all up in the last 50 years, right? So we need to get back. We need to get back. Maybe even longer now. In the last 60 years, we got to get back to the basics. It all goes back to the basics, right? So ditch the paper plates and get the china out.
I feel like just to intentionally set that table and not be in a rush. It just, I think that would heal not only the family, the nuclear families, and who you have as friends, as family sitting at your table and community. It just changes everything when you share a meal with people. That's what we're called to do is to break bread with each other. And you have a whole lifetime of bringing this message to people, and it's beautiful. And I'm honored to be talking with you and finally recording our.
I want to ask you this question. This is the last question. How will you nourish yourself today?
Today, I'm going to go out in the sun because we have not. It's been May gray, June gloom out here. We've been socked in, so I'm going to go out in the sun. It's very sunny today, so I'm going to go to the sun, lay by my pool, and
love it.
Just
I love it.
Yeah,
and just be right.
So.
I think that's wonderful. So with that, I want everybody to think about how they're going to nourish themselves. And I always want to wind this down with a breath. So together, let's do a guided breath exercise. So I'll invite you to close down your eyes. If you're driving, please keep your eyes on the road and just listen gently to the meditation. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And slowly exhale out the back of your throat. And you can do that a few more times on your own, inhaling, exhaling, preferably twice as long as you're inhaling. And just start to feel the tension let go. And I just like you to envision yourself in an open field, the beauty of the sun and the blue sky. Feel the warmth of that sun on your skin. Look out at the possibilities of the field. And now look down to your feet and to the ground underneath your feet. And take notice of the soil And with each breath, I want you to imagine your mind like an open field with infinite possibility for growth. And I want you to focus now on one seed that you can plant in that field. What will that seed represent? When you have that seed in mind, just gently put it into the ground. Cover it with soil. And then I want you to look up into the sun and the sky and just say with your hand on your heart, I trust the process. And now when you're ready, slowly open your eyes and remember today, with each seed that's planted, we have to trust the process.